How's it going, everybody? Welcome in to another episode of the Mavs Step Back Podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Trigg. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Drew Johnson. You can find both of us on X at Dalton_Trigg and at Coach Drew 33. Bear with me today. I don't really fully sound like myself because I've been yelling at the top of my lungs at college baseball games for the last 4 days. So, little hoarse. I'm recovering. It was a fun weekend though. Got a tan. Got to watch some good baseball, even though my team lost in the final game. So it's always Southern Miss to the top though. So we're moving on to football season now. In the meantime, we have a lot of Mavs offseason stuff that's going to be. I'm not going to say it's picking up steam right now, but like we're already getting the wheels rolling on things because as soon as the NBA Finals end between the OKC Thunder and the Pacers, Adam Silver's worst nightmare as far as having two small market teams in the finals. But as soon as that's over, then a week later you'll have the draft, and then a week after that you'll have free agency, and there will be trades mixed in, both of those things. So it's going to be coming up fast, and we're going to be doing like at least a 3-part series, maybe more if, I come up with some other different trade ideas, or if we see some report, linking the Mavs to another player we're not thinking about. But this is the first part of it, and it's one trade specifically because we've talked about Kevin Durant in the past, and at first it was like before the Mavs won the draft lottery, it was just like, do you really want to gut your depth for Kevin Durant, who's 36 going on 37 years old? He's still very good. Hall of Famer, future Hall of Famer, still very, very good. Like he could be a key piece on a championship team still, but he makes so much money, around $50 million a year, I believe. Mm-hmm. And so you got to trade a lot of depth unless you're just swapping him straight up for Anthony Davis. And it's like, that doesn't really make sense for this Mavs team. But now it might, because winning the draft lottery and bringing in Cooper Flagg now, all of a sudden, losing some depth doesn't really matter that much because of his versatility. He could realistically, Cooper Flagg can play the 3 through the 5.
Yep.
If needed. And it's been reported that the Phoenix Suns are prioritizing getting a good center in any KD trade talks. And it's also reported that they want to get back into the first round of this draft too, which obviously the Mavs aren't doing that because they're not trading the first pick. They're getting Cooper Flagg. But here's my idea. And we've talked about this, a week or so ago, and I saved it in my notes. And now with this new KD report coming out, I want to, put it on here. But the Mavs could trade for KD, and just for salary matching purposes, no picks involved on the Mavs end, just players. Daniel Gafford, so the Suns are getting their center. Klay Thompson mainly is just salary filler. He could also be a vet that could, mentor some of the guys on Phoenix's roster, and PJ Washington. And then you'd have to throw in one more player like Caleb Martin, which who I think his twin brother plays for Phoenix now too.
How about that?
That could work out. But you trade those 4 players for Kevin Durant. Then, I know in that trade proposal that, they're not giving Phoenix a pick, but you could get your center in Gafford if you're Phoenix, and you could probably turn around and trade PJ Washington and get a middle of the pack first round pick. I don't think that's a stretch to say. I know this draft is, loaded in our opinion. Some people disagree with that, but I think it's loaded, especially in the first round. PJ Washington is still young enough, versatile enough, and on a good contract as far as, he's expiring, but he's making a good number, that I think some team would trade a fringe contender or like fringe lottery team would trade their first round pick in this draft to get PJ Washington. So that's my idea. I think KD makes more sense now than he did before the lottery because you're getting Cooper Flag. You need more roster spots anyway to add guard depth. So you could trade those players, get Kevin Durant to pair with Kyrie Irving, Cooper Flag, Anthony Davis, Derek Lively, and company. And then you turn around with your open roster spots and you get guard depth. You know, there's been rumors about some of the free agent point guards like Chris Paul, our guy Dennis Smith Jr., Spencer Dinwiddie, who, you know, he's up and down. You know, he's inconsistent, but he's had some good moments as a backup guard for the Mavs. He's a free agent again too. So, you know, there's three right off the top of my head who could be signed cheap and, you know, kind of bridge the gap until you get to a point where Kyrie returns. So that's my idea. KD for those four players. And then with your open roster spots, you go out and sign. You could sign all of them for your guard depth. You get CP3, DSJ, and Dinwiddie if you wanted to, and just have a plethora of guards. And then, you know, when Kyrie's getting closer to returning, then maybe you assess what's on the market as you get closer to the trade deadline. But what do you think about this idea?
I mean, I think that Cooper Flag is the type of player that you don't necessarily have to just straight up build for the future, right? Like, I think that he could be a central piece to a win now scenario. And we've said that. And I think that if you bring Kevin Durant in, you know, that's really what you're going after, is to try and go for a title right now. And I don't hate that. My big thing is, if we do send that package off, could we potentially make it a 3-team trade to satisfy Phoenix's desire for a pick? And if so, in this trade, could we acquire a decent guard? Now,
Probably could.
What team would that be? Let me ask you this first. What team currently has Phoenix's draft rights for the number 10 pick? Because that's what they want. They specifically said they want their number 10 pick back.
It's the Rockets, I believe. Let me see, because there's been some smoke there. Let me pull up Tankathon. They have that. Yeah, it's Houston. Houston owns their number 10 pick. So
I don't see them giving up Reed Shepherd. I would love that. I would love that so much. But
now
they don't do that.
Just from looking at the lottery here, though, I already have some bells going off in my brain.
Okay.
Because, you know, we won that coin flip with Chicago, which put us at 11th best odds. And, you know, we got to jump up to first while they had to stay at 12th. And there's been rumors, you know, about Lonzo Ball and the Mavs potentially being interested in him. If they're trying to trade him and they want to get a decent player back, and like PJ Washington, who obviously has a much better injury history than Lonzo Ball has, maybe that's where your first round pick comes from to satisfy Phoenix in a KD trade. You know, now, I don't know how you make all the salary matching work in a 3-team trade between the Suns, the Mavs, and the Bulls, but, you know, that's one option I could see. You know, the Mavs have Clay, Gafford, PJ, Caleb Martin going out. The Suns have Kevin Durant going out to Dallas, and then Chicago has Lonzo Ball going to Dallas with PJ Washington going to Chicago. And then just saying that out loud, I know that has to have some tinkering done, so I'll have to look at it a little bit closer. But, you know, that's one option I'm thinking of that could work. But If Lonzo Ball, what does Lonzo Ball make? Like 10 million per year?
Somewhere
I,
around there, yeah.
I think that's right. So I mean, if the Mavs are taking in Kevin Durant and Lonzo Ball in that type of scenario, then it means that the Mavs would have to have more salary going out than just the four players I mentioned. So that might not be realistic.
Yeah, it
Uh,
may not be Lonzo. I'm
so
trying
that
to look.
I'm
Oh,
thinking that's
nah, never
probably
work.
what is it?
I was gonna say Atlanta might have, you know, something of substance, but there was some talk of them wanting to offload Trey Young back in the day. I don't know if that's still a thing, but that's still way too much money.
I've seen several rumors here lately about, the Hawks would have interest in trading for Kevin Durant,
Hmm.
to pair with Trey Young. I've seen Shams Charania reported that Giannis and KD have had talks about potentially teaming up in Toronto,
I saw
which,
that.
which I hate that idea. Like
Yeah,
I don't think that would work, but
no, it wasn't at all.
uh, especially with how much those two make. I mean, I just don't see how it would work. But
What
um,
about Oklahoma City? OKC currently has the number 15 pick. What if we were able to swing it to where they sent the number 15 pick to I'm blanking out here. Uh
uh, Phoenix.
to Phoenix. And what if they sent us one of their guards who is on a very team friendly contract right now? Because you got to remember they're a bunch of young guys. They all are making low money, so to speak. Could that be a something to potentially look at? And and they get PJ Washington, who is they're the one that murders them. So I mean, let's look at their roster really quick.
Don't have to fear PJ anymore.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, let's see here.
sign him.
Let's see. Lou Dort. I mean, they're not going to do it. Isaiah Joe. Um, let's see here. Adam Flagler. I don't know who he is.
I don't either.
Aaron Wiggins.
He's interesting.
Ajay Mitchell.
No idea.
Cason Wallace. We ain't getting him.
No way. They will never let him go.
Oh, Nikola Topic.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's what we need.
there we go.
You think they can let him go?
I mean, I don't see any route to him playing anytime soon with them. I mean, if they're in win now mode, which they obviously are, they're playing in the NBA Finals right now. I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't.
I like that idea a lot. He's got a lot of upside. This would be his big shot. I mean, he would get to run the one while Kyrie's away.
6'6" guard, 200 pounds, 19 years old.
I think this is it. I think this is the one.
That would be good. That'd be good. And, I mean, the Mavs have. I mean, they have a history with making trades with OKC. So I mean, uh, I could see it happening.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. Let's see. Let's go back to these picks in the first round and see. Minnesota. They're probably going to keep that pick if I had to guess.
I could see Portland offloading some people.
Portland, yeah, I could see that. There's been rumors about Anthony Simons
Yep.
being in trade talks. I'm sure they'd probably trade Ayton.
Yeah.
What if Ayton got traded back to Phoenix? That'd be funny.
I don't see that happening, but it would be hilarious.
Send KD to Portland. Let's see. Orlando, they're probably going to keep that pick. I'm trying to think which teams might end up trading. Utah with the 21st pick from Minnesota, they might trade that.
I could see it.
Atlanta, they have the 22nd pick, which was the Lakers pick. Indiana. OKC has another first round pick at number 24.
I want to act shocked, but I'm not.
Yeah,
Dang,
Brooklyn
dude, they got Danny Wolf going in the first round. Wow.
jumped.
Huge jump, man. I like him. I like Danny Wolf a lot. I wasn't sure if he was a first round guy.
Let's see. So, I mean, nothing's really ringing a bell with me looking at the rest of these on here, but yeah, I'm thinking that that's probably the best option as far as, them getting what they want. In a center, you get Daniel Gafford, you get the first round pick. OKC would get something out of it with PJ Washington because obviously he's killed them over the years. Like I was determined. I'm glad it turned out the way it did, but I was determined if the Mavs had made the playoffs, if they had won that final playing game, that we were going to beat OKC. Just because, even without Kyrie and without Luka, just because PJ Washington owns them that much. Like, so, that you'd think a team that's in the finals right now would love to reinforce their depth and add a player who has killed them over the years. And he's still young, he's like 26 years old, I believe. So that would be good. And then obviously, like we talked about, the Mavs could get a prospect on the cheap end in Nikola Topic, which would be, I'm very intrigued by that. I'm glad we went through their roster because I completely forgot about him. Get Jokic's Serbian little brother on the team. Let's see. I lost you there for a second.
Sorry, Chrome crashed. So
that's okay. Another thing I was going to talk about, or wanted to ask you about, because we've talked about in the past, and this will be the last thing we talk about. We'll get off of here because I didn't want to stay on here too long. I just wanted to bring up that KD trade idea that makes a lot more sense now that the Mavs are getting Cooper Flag. In my opinion, I think you can trade the depth now since since Cooper Flag is falling in your lap. So, but now with that being said, do you think there's any way the Mavs could trade back into the first round and get another young stud guard to pair with Cooper? Because, we briefly talked about on one of the previous pods, maybe you could offer Anthony Davis to the San Antonio Spurs and see if they bite and give you the second pick since they already traded for De'Aaron Fox. I don't think that'll happen. I think they're more likely to just trade Fox now, if anything. Mm-hmm. And they're dead set on getting Dylan Harper. So let's scratch that one for now and just look down the board at some of these guys. Jeremiah Fears is very interesting to me. Like I really love the guy. Now I know you have some reserve when it comes to him because you said his dad is kind of like a distraction. He's kind of what was it with him that was such a big deal in college?
Well, this past year, before he really took off, it was assumed that he'd be coming back or he'd be playing college basketball his sophomore year, right? And so his dad was on Twitter basically trying to, stir up interest in where Jeremiah Fears was going to be playing next year. And the season wasn't even halfway over. I mean, I think we were like fresh into conference play. That's just not a good look. It's not a good look.
Kind of giving LeVar Ball vibes.
It's not that intense. Nothing's that intense. But it's just that's just not something you do. And I mean, if he's willing to say stuff like that while he's in college, imagine what he'll be, he'll think he's entitled to say whenever his kid's a pro and things aren't going his way. Imagine how that goes over in a pro locker room. It doesn't. It straight up won't.
Yeah.
So I think I would stay away personally.
I don't know. I love the guy. I think he would be an excellent young guard to pair with Cooper Flag. Um, getting him off to the right start with somebody on his own timeline. Now, with that being said, I don't know how the Mavs would trade with Utah for that number 5 pick unless I'm looking at things right now. I'm looking at the contracts on here. The Mavs do need a guard, and I don't think they could trade for that number 5 pick with Utah, but they have Colin Sexton making $19 million on an expiring contract. That's a guy that's very gettable for the Mavs, in my opinion.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at that and thinking, man, they could definitely get it. You could probably get Colin Sexton on an expiring contract for like Klay Thompson. Because Clay, I mean, he's only got one more year on his deal after this. And maybe they'd want the veteran leadership. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking about that wrong. But I think once you get to an expiring contract and it's a guy that you have no intention of extending at all, it's a little bit different from the Mavs perspective because, I feel like extensions for Gafford and PJ are on the table. Now, I don't know if they'll do it or not, but I think it's at least on the table. And then if you go to trade them later on, you can maximize their value because you have them on longer deals. When I look at Utah and where they are in their building process, I don't think that there's a chance that they sign Colin Sexton to an extension. So I feel like the Mavs could get him. But, I mean, what are your thoughts on Sexton?
I like Sexton a lot. I think that he could come in, play both sides of the ball really well, and he'd be a nice little relief option for even when Kyrie returns. I love him defensively. He's really improved as a shot maker. No, I like that move. It just depends on what they ask for him. If it's Klay Thompson straight up, great. But something tells me they'd want something a little extra. I don't know what tells me that, but something tells me they'd want something a little extra. Because does that move make sense for them as far as their roster is concerned right now?
Yeah.
What do they look like in the guard department right now? I'm not even looking at their roster.
I'm not either. I was just looking on the trade deal, but that's the only one I know off the top of my head is Colin Sexton.
Yeah,
It's there's not a lot of depth there, and you have Jordan Clarkson, but I mean I don't consider him he can play point guard, but that's not his natural position in my opinion.
he's a tweeter.
He has shown he can handle the ball a little bit, but I mean that's not who he is. But yeah, it's funny. I keep looking at this mock draft, and it's got OKC with Miami's pick at the number 15 spot that we've already talked about, and they have Jace Richardson from Michigan State going at that spot. So say the Mavs just abandon the KD thing altogether, there's probably a trade that could be formulated with OKC just one-on-one. Forget KD, and you could still send PJ Washington to OKC and probably get that 15th pick and get a guy like Jace Richardson, who's he's a little undersized for a point guard, but
he's good though, man. He's
pretty
real
solid.
Yeah, he's good. He was great for Michigan State this past year. I'm gonna tell you what though, man. Like, if you're gonna trade PJ Washington just straight up for a pick, I would try to get in the top 10. I think, that may be overshooting it a little bit, and if so, I'm sorry. I think you could potentially get a top 10 pick for PJ. I really do. The only reason that I had the Oklahoma City thing going on was because it just worked with the KD trade. But I really think you could warrant a top 10 pick with PJ. And I'd really like to see us get to like that number 7, number 8 area, maybe even 10. Igor Dimon, I know that I'm a broken record talking about him, but Igor Dimon would be a nice little get. He's not necessarily a proven shot maker yet, but he's a great playmaker, especially for someone who's 6'9". I think that the reward well outweighs the risk, and I think he could really be something, but that's just my personal opinion. I also love Trey Johnson out of Texas. Now, he's not necessarily a point guard. He's a shot creating, shot making 2 guard, but I think the future is incredibly bright for that kid. I don't think that we would be able to get a high enough pick for him, though. I don't know if you can get top 5 with PJ, and I think that's where Trey's going to likely end up as top 5.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Igor Dimon, and in this mock draft, I keep looking at it. Tankathon, it's got him going 18th to the Washington Wizards. Wouldn't that be funny if you sent Daniel Gafford back to the
That'd be funny.
to the Wizards? Which I don't know. I don't know if they do that. They might be interested in PJ though, but I just thought I promise this is going to be the last one because things keep popping into my mind, and I was going to keep it simple, but I can't because the wheels get to rolling, and I just have these ideas, and I got to talk about it. So this was one idea that popped into my head when I was just looking at this first round mock draft. So the Orlando Magic have the 25th pick in the first round. This current mock draft has Walter Clayton Jr. going 25th. What if the Mavs swapped PJ Washington and Jonathan Isaac and got that pick because of Jonathan Isaac's injury history? Because I don't know. I think Orlando would do that.
You think so?
Yeah, because
I would like that a lot.
I think Orlando would do that just based on Jonathan Isaac's injury history. Let me look up how many games Isaac has actually played. And he may have played more this season, but let's see. Yeah. Okay. So this season he played 71 games.
That's pretty good.
But he only played 15 minutes per game. So he played 71 games, 15 minutes per game. Before he had all of his major injuries, he was playing near 30 minutes per game. So he didn't play in the 2020-21 season. Same in 21-22. Missed 2 full seasons. Played 11 games when he came back in the 22-23 season. 58 games the season before last. And then finally this past season, 71 games. So I don't know. I mean, I look at that, and then on the other hand, let's see. Jonathan Isaac is 27. He'll be 28 in October. Then you have PJ Washington, who's 26. He'll be 27 in August. So he's a year younger. Let's see. Historically, he's played more games. Let's see. In 6 years, PJ Washington has played 390 games. And by comparison, Jonathan Isaac in 6 years has played 276 games. So PJ's played more than 100 games than Isaac has, and he's younger. So I don't know. I like that idea. I think they would do it, especially if it was any higher than 25th pick, I don't know that they'd do it. But I think Orlando has enough guard depth and really enough wing depth too, to where they would do that. They could swap Jonathan Isaac for PJ, get a healthier, more sure thing as far as being healthy, and still have a good offensive and defensive wing. And then the Mavs, obviously, they're taking a chance with Isaac and his health, but we've seen what he can do when he's healthy. He can be one of the best defensive players in the league. I'm looking at his numbers right now. He only played 71 games last year, only 15 minutes per game, 5.4 points per game, 4.4 rebounds. He only shot 41.4% from the field 25.8% from three. So he played a good bit of games, but he wasn't very good. So, you could look at this as kind of like a reclamation project for the Mavs, and then they get Walter Clayton Jr.
How many years? Let me ask you this: how many years does Jonathan Isaac have left on his contract?
He is expiring, I believe.
Perfect.
No. He is not expiring. So that would factor into it as well as why Orlando would probably give us the pick, because PJ is expiring. But Jonathan Isaac has, let's see, 3 more years left on his contract. It's $15 million a year. I mean, I feel like that's doable.
It's doable, but I'm gonna tell you what, I'd almost be willing to ask for more out of them. Get next year's pick too. I mean, here's the thing. Here's the thing. The obvious prize here in this scenario is not Jonathan Isaac. It's the 25th pick, aka Walter Clayton Jr. I love the idea of just letting Walter run up until Kyrie comes back. Let's see what the kid's made of at this stage. And I think he will surprise a lot of people. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Walter Clayton wasn't the steal of the draft. It also wouldn't surprise me at all if Walter Clayton went higher than 25th, as this one suggests. I've also seen some have him in the second round, which I think is just crazy. People use his age against him all the time, but I don't understand why. I've said this before on this before, but older point guards, especially good ones that are proven in the NCAA, they tend to do pretty well in the NBA. I can think of a few right off the bat that have done really well in the NBA, aka Steve Nash, Steph Curry. Those guys were 3-year guys whenever they came out. So I think Steve Nash may have actually been a 4-year guy now that I think about it. But
yeah, he was. I'm pretty sure that's right.
So Brunson was a multi-year guy, and so it just goes to show that age really isn't a factor with point guards. In fact, you kind of like to see the maturity. And who is going to be more mature than a point guard who led his team to a national championship the previous year?
Yeah, situation means a lot,
yep.
Especially with guys like that. And I think he could really thrive. Like, you don't see this opportunity very often. A team that really, if you take away what happened with Luka being traded, you look at this roster with Cooper Flag added to it, top to bottom. It's like, pretty dang good roster. It's pretty stacked, pretty talented, but it's lacking guard depth. It's lacking leadership, organization on the court. And that's where you could have a guy like that come in and get a lot of exposure. And then you could fortify a guard rotation around him just so the burden isn't so heavy on him. He could still get a lot of exposure, a lot of playing time, learning, but then it's not all on him. You have a guy like Chris Paul you bring in to mentor him, maybe a DSJ to come off the bench and, have some spot minutes and, just kind of fill a void there until Kyrie gets back. So there's a very good path, in my opinion, to drafting a guy like him and getting him the exposure he needs without overwhelming him in the first year. I think he'd thrive in Dallas. I love the guy.
I think he would be fantastic. And if we were able to do that, it's kind of ironic. They say the Mavs had the best draft in NBA history, that draft where they got both Luka and Brunson, right?
Yeah.
How funny would it be if we were able to do that again with Flag and Clayton?
That'd be crazy.
Very similar situation. Very similar.
Here's another option with Orlando. I keep saying I'm not going to do anything else, and then I just keep going. It's a problem. But Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was not. He was a new signee for Orlando, and he was not good for them. he was not. He was kind of think about THJ at his worst when he was with the Mavs, like being inconsistent and stuff. That's kind of what Pope was for them. So, he still has a year left on his contract. He only shot 34% from three. Meanwhile, Klay Thompson makes about the same amount that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope makes. And yeah, Klay is older, but he shot nearly 40% from three. And, he can still play some defense too. So that may be another way that the Mavs could get that late first-round pick from Orlando, because they have the same amount of years left on their contract. They essentially have the same role, and Klay is a much better three-point shooter recently than Pope. So, that might be a way that – because I think there were some rumors that – I think Orlando was one of the teams that was in the mix for Klay. It was the Mavs, the Lakers, and Orlando, if I'm not mistaken, heading up to free agency. So I could see that being an option. You get Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, hope he can do something in Dallas the way he did in Denver before he got to Orlando, and then you still get that late first-round pick and get Walter Clayton Jr. So that's where we're going to stop for now, because
I'm drawing the line.
I'm drawing the line in the sand. I did not intend to go into that much stuff. I intended to just break this down into one complex trade scenario per part, but I'm sure this will still end up being a multi-part series because now that Southern Miss baseball is over, now that they got eliminated in the regionals, my full focus is back on the Mavs and what they can do with the draft approaching and free agency and trades and all that stuff. So I'm going to do my homework. I'm going to have some more ready to talk about next weekend. And I'm sure you'll be throwing some stuff off the wall too. So, guys, we appreciate it. Thanks for coming in and listening every single week. I know the pace has slowed down a little bit since the season ended, but everybody needs a little bit of rest. And it was a crazy season full of intense emotions, and it finally swung back in a big way with the Mavs winning the lottery. And we can't wait to bring you more Dallas Mavericks coverage, including Cooper Flagg, going into the near future and hopefully the long-term future, assuming Nico doesn't do something stupid again. So, guys, we appreciate it. Y'all have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time.
See y'all.